Parents, there's nothing more frustrating than seeing your kids struggle with some sort of chronic health challenge. And if you've been there, you probably feel like you've done everything to help. You've been down so many different paths. You've dealt with doctors who you don't feel like will listen to you, and you can't do anything to get to the root cause. You feel like you're left on your own, just passed from specialist to specialist on this merry-go-round of different medications or treatments or therapies or detoxes and diet changes, but you're still struggling and you're still stuck. If that's you, one, you're not alone. There are so many families who are dealing with that, who are just fed up and stuck with that traditional healthcare system. And the other good news is you're in the right place. The reality is that if that's been your story, you are probably dealing with a neurological issue. The nervous system is probably the missing piece of everything. So that's what this video is for, to walk through what's really going on and how can that be the centerpiece. Because the nervous system controls everything. It is the center hub of every other piece of your wellness, your gut, your immune system, your mental, emotional regulation. All of it is centered in neurology. So if that is missing, you're going to be frustrated no matter what other approaches and techniques that you're using. And honestly, this conversation reminds me of a story that we were just talking about with one of our Thrive families. There's a little boy named Noah, and he was dealing with all sorts of ADHD, anxiety, emotional regulation struggles in school. And they were dealing with some pressure from the school, from the teachers to do something, to, reality is, medicate him. They didn't want to do it, ended up giving in. They put him on a stimulant medication to try to help with the ADHD, and it went the opposite direction. He started dealing with now Tourette's and a neurological tic. So quickly, after I think it was maybe a month or so, they pulled him off of that, tried a new medication, and now he's dealing with the inability to even stay awake. He's constantly so drowsy, so exhausted, and it feels like he's falling asleep instead of able to thrive in school. So they're like, all right, we're done with this. We're fed up. There's got to be a better way. There's got to be something that actually addresses the real issue at play and not just putting a Band-Aid on the symptoms. And that's where they found Neurologically-Focused Pediatric Chiropractic. We're still early in this little dude's care plan, but we're just celebrating only being a couple weeks, a month or so in. He had, at the end of last school year, he had the best couple of days of school he'd had. The teacher was like, oh my gosh, he can actually regulate his emotions. And it was so cute the way he put it. He said, I feel like I can actually take a deep breath and regulate and be more relaxed and more at ease. So those stories are the norm in here. They're not common enough in everyday life. It's usually that frustration merry-go-round of lack of success when you go through that traditional route. But in Thrive, we get to see those stories and those wins every day with parents. So coming back to understanding what's going on, you've really got to be able to look at and measure the right stuff. What happens with so many people is that the testing, the specialists, the different people that you're passed to and from, everything is fine, right? Everything is, they'll grow out of it, or this is normal, and there's never really an answer given. From our perspective, you're probably doing the wrong test. When we measure the nervous system's function, instead of just a pathological end state disease, you're gonna get different answers. And that's definitely what we saw with Noah's early scans, is that those measurements of what's called dysautonomia, or a dysregulated nervous system, were all sorts of out of whack. That's a very technical term for it. But he was struggling in many ways internally, which meant that, of course, all the external challenges that he was faced with were going to be overwhelming, were going to push him over the edge, and he wasn't going to be able to regulate and handle life as he should. So we got to think about this differently, not just focus on the symptoms, but starting to ask those deeper why questions. Neurological regulation issues can start super young. The first things that we see are the early warning signs before it shows up as deeper sensory anxiety, school age struggles. It shows up as usually gut issues, maybe immune system struggles, maybe sleep disturbances. A lot of times parents that we're dealing with that are older kiddos can think back to those newborn years and those early years of life, and they did have a colicky, refluxy, constipated baby or some version of that, or they struggled to latch, or they were never one that was really able to wind down and sleep, or they had chronic ear infections or allergies and asthma and coughs and colds. There's some piece of that story that we saw brooding below the surface before it even turned into the deeper neurological challenges that the kiddos were struggling with by the time that they reached out here. So let's think about this differently. Let's stop chasing the symptoms, just looking for a new medication, a new temporary patch on the problem, and address it from the inside out. Address it from the neurological perspective, and you're going to get different results and different answers from that. There's 3 different scans that we use, 3 different tests. One's called HRV, or heart rate variability. It's measuring your body's vagus nerve. It's measuring your body's growth and development, wellness, rest, relaxation, immune system, and digestion. That brake pedal, or what's called the parasympathetic function, is what we get to check in with in that first test. So the vagus nerve is all of that wellness stuff. We should see a nice balanced autonomic nervous system, not one that's stuck in fight or flight and stress. So that's the big picture. We've got 2 other scans then that hone in on where within your nervous system, where within that kid's body are those primary findings, right? Are they dealing with mostly upper cervical vagus nerve challenges? Is there a lot of lower GI, lower gut stuff? Or is there anything else in between? So we get to actually quantify and measure it on that first scan. And then as we go throughout care, we keep up with those care plan scans and those scan updates to see what's changing and what's different. Make sure that we're unwinding and healing as we're supposed to. That's our focus at Thrive, guys. If you're frustrated, if you're sick of the lack of answers and the lack of even thinking about these problems in the right way, you probably need to look for something else. You're probably in the right place if you're looking and watching this video. So many families like you have been in those shoes before, and they've found better hope, answers, and help through turning to a more what we call inside-out approach rather than an outside-in one. So head up the link in our article here if you want to dig in this more. If you want to go and figure out some of the neurology and the science at play, reach out to our team, send us a message here. We'd love to get your kid scanned. We'd love to answer any other questions you have and just make sure that we're doing whatever we can to help your family thrive.